What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns and gunfighting the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, I'm going to put in the bio. I've been leaving it out, and I do think it gets rather redundant for the regular listeners, but we get new listeners all the time. I recently had somebody reach out to me about an episode and said, something about the episode, and they asked, but what experience do you have? And that's core to me making this podcast. There are a ton of gun podcasts out there, and nothing wrong with them. I listen to other gun podcasts, but this is not just armchair quarterbacking. I put in the bio for a reason: military, law enforcement, private contracting experience, professional hunting and guiding experience, all those things. Because it's real-world first-hand experience, not because I want to. Honestly, don't like talking about the bio, which is why I usually have a pre-recorded one. But I'm going to put it in. That's a long way of saying I'm going to put it in this episode because it's been a while. And for the new listeners, I want them to understand it comes from real-world first-hand experience. With that, a short version of the bio, and then we'll get into today's topic: the most flexible gun in every category. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life: serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. Okay, keep in mind, this is most flexible gun in every category, not the best at certain things, not saying it's the best gun for you in your situation. I'm saying most flexible. Kind of like a Swiss Army knife. They do a lot of things, and they do some things decently. But let's say, the screwdriver on a Swiss Army knife is never going to be as good as a purpose-built, snap-on, correctly sized Phillips head screwdriver. That's not the point. The point is to be the most flexible. That snap-on Phillips head screwdriver that perfectly fits that screw is great for that, but it's not super great. Not great as a knife. Not great for a pair of tweezers, right? If you need a pair of tweezers, the little Swiss Army knife is going to be better than the snap-on Phillips head screwdriver. That's what we're getting at here. So I'm not telling you that you should get rid of your carry gun and adopt one of these handguns because it's more flexible. We're going to go through all different categories, so just realize that. If I talk about a rifle, I'm not saying it's the best battlefield implement. That is a specialty thing, right? That would be a specialty application. I've done ones on best, battle rifles. Battle rifle is a specific niche. I'm talking about most flexible. So, with that being said, let's start off with handguns, because this one surprises, I think, even me. Even me thinking about this is not what I thought it would be on a cursory if you'd have just asked me, but when I actually thought about it, I came up to a different conclusion. A revolver. Revolvers aren't the best carry guns. They're not as good for, duty use, police use. They're not as good as a combat fighting handgun for the military. But I do like revolvers, and they do have some merit. I'm going to talk about the merits inherent to revolvers that semi-autos don't have. They're very flexible in their diet. They're more omnivorous than a semi-auto. You see, let me explain. Like a modern, let's just use the ubiquitous Glock 19. It shoots 9mm, and you can go up a little bit and shoot like 9mm plus P. But whether you're shooting 115 grain at, let's say, 1,200 feet a second, or 147 grain at 980, and these are rough numbers, right? You need a certain amount, force equals mass times acceleration. And for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Well, you need a pretty predictable reaction in the force coming back to cycle that slide. If you put in too light a load, it will not reliably cycle that slide. If you put in too heavy a load, you can really damage the gun. So you are pretty constrained. And again, you can do flexible things. You can go super light or super heavy. But in general, you need the same amount of force within the parameters to make that gun work reliably. A revolver doesn't need that, right? A revolver, you can load super, super mild. If you can get that bullet out of the end of the barrel, I don't care if it's going one, and this is not really practical, but just to prove a point, if you got that so it would reliably have the bullet exit the muzzle at 1 feet per second and drop, you could fire that revolver, if it's a 6-shot, 6 times, and it wouldn't affect the reliability. It wouldn't be very effective, but you get the point. But you could load it way down if you wanted less power. You could also load it super hot. As long as you are within the parameters of the pressures of that round, and sometimes exceeding them in certain revolvers. Right? If you're doing that, as long as you're not going so crazy as to blow up the gun, it shouldn't affect the reliability either. So you've got a lot more flexibility. It's a lot more omnivorous. For instance, talking about handgun shot shells. They are made for the 9mm even. But I've never in practice had one or seen one that would reliably cycle a handgun. You could probably cut the spring or something, but at that point you're just shooting the shot shells. I'm talking about the main recoil spring. I don't advise that you do that. You could probably get it to work, but then it would only work with the shot shells. Again, not super flexible. Revolvers, most common calibers, have those shot shell options, both in smaller shot and larger shot sizes. You can even load your own, and they should work just fine for however many rounds a cylinder will hold. Talking about that flexibility. You can also load way down. We're talking about flexible. The old standby, just straight kind of flat cylinder. They look like a can of food, but shrunk. Wad cutters, the old 147 grain lead wad cutters in a 38 caliber or 357 caliber, right? You load those down really mild. They're great, precise. In fact, they're used for bullseye shooting. They're a great, accurate, low recoil round. They'd also be just fine for small game hunting. They're not at such a high velocity. They're going to destroy a ton of game. They are pretty good at that kind of thing. Like, if you're looking at dispatching a varmint like a coyote or a raccoon or a fox or something, getting into your livestock, they'll do just fine for that. They're fine for that. In normal times, it's probably not legal, but practically they would take a turkey, they would take, grouse, things like that. On the higher end, too, you can load up, most of these ones I'm going to talk about are going to be magnums, and you can load them up to take most game animals reliably. The first one that I thought of was 357, and this is not my final call, but it will be a good call, and you may decide it. And for flexibility, I want it to straddle all things. Like, it needs to be a decent carry gun, so it can't be ridiculously big and heavy, because it's most flexible. And it can't be so small that it's not great for a go-to fighting handgun or decent for hunting. Like a J-frame, a Smith & Wesson J-frame. I love my J-frame. It's one of my go-to carry guns. I have a J-frame 357 Magnum. It's a good micro, compact, concealed carry handgun. It would not be great for hunting, although I think I've probably shot animals with it because it's what I had, but it's not great for that. It's too small. Likewise, a Ruger Super Red Hawk, 44 Magnum and let's say a 7.5 inch barrel is a great hunting handgun, but let's be real, most people aren't going to carry that. They're just not going to carry it, and I think handguns are primarily for defense. So I was initially thinking a mid-frame 357, stainless steel. Why? Because stainless, if you're talking about versatility, longevity, I would go stainless, and some medium frame like a Colt Python, and something but around the 4 inch. You could go give or take an inch, but around the 4 inch or the Smith & Wesson Model 66. You could go down to the shot shells, which are fine. 38 Special Plus P, which is pretty prevalent, and 357 Magnum. Now, like a hard cast, either if you're just east of the Mississippi, pretty much a semi-jacketed 158 grain 357 Magnum, that'd pretty much kill anything you're going to run into east of the Mississippi, even east of the Missouri probably. If you want to go a little bit heavier, you can go the 180 grain. I have some of those right now loaded in my gun as I am in Alaska. But 180 grain hard cast, they're good. They'll kill anything in North America. 180 grain hard cast 357 Magnums. But then I thought, if we're talking about most flexible, there are some options in the 44 Magnum 44 Special. Now, 44 Special is not as common, but it is. It is a decent defensive round. If you look at it ballistically, 44 Special, modern loadings, is no slouch. It will be a fine carry gun. The caveat is you have to find a 44 mag revolver that is decent enough size that I think the average person would carry it. That would carry a full-size fighting handgun. I usually can still carry a full-size fighting handgun day to day. Along that size and weight, there are two options that I'm aware of that are still big enough that would be decent for hunting. The Smith & Wesson Model 69, which is a 5-shot, and either 5-shot of 44 Special for defense or 44 Magnum for hunting would be fine for most situations. Also, the Smith & Wesson. The Smith & Wesson 329 PD is quite a bit lighter, although it is larger. It's a 6-shot, but it's scandium frame, super light. From the Smith & Wesson website, 26 point something ounces. That is lighter than my general, one of my go-to carry guns, a SIG 226. That's pretty cool. And it's 44 Magnum / 44 Special. Here's another reason. If times got really bad, and I'm a survivalist, a prepper, I don't apologize for that. These rounds, you could load any round with black powder, but the gun should function reliably. It's going to get dirtier, but there's no reason you couldn't load any of these revolver rounds, 38 Special, 44 Special, with black powder, and the gun would work reliably. If we got into really hard times, you could cast your own bullets. Casting lead is not that hard. Having a mold is not that hard. I did it when I was probably far too young to be doing it, but it's not that hard. It's just fairly dangerous, but it's not complicated. You can cast your own lead bullets. You can make your own black powder. If you know how to reuse primers and undent them and make the compound, you could do that. And here's the reason one of the reasons I think the 44 Special, 44 Magnum might be a better thing. Because if you loaded it with black powder, although a 38 Special with black powder would certainly work, if your black powder is not as powerful as smokeless powder, right? That's why we went to smokeless powder, and it's cleaner. But if I was doing black powder loads, I think the 44 would be a better option than the 38. Also, the shot shells. I think the shot shells are going to be more effective. You're going to get more pellets, whether it's the smaller bird shot or the larger shot. You're going to get more pellets in the 44 shot shells than you are the 38 shot shells. And not that a 357 Magnum wouldn't be great for hunting most things. It certainly is. But if you are relying on it to hunt, the 44 mag opens up more possibilities. There are more shot angles, greater distance. Handgun hunting is hard. I don't advise that as a way to put meat on the table unless you have to. But if it was the gun that you had, I think you're going to open up more shot opportunities with the 44 than the 357. So I think one of those, either the Smith & Wesson 69 or the 329 PD, would be a fantastic, most flexible gun. They wouldn't be too big to carry. They'd be decent for hunting, decent for defense with proper loads, decent with shot shells. If you wanted to take smaller game, if you wanted to load it way down and load like a really mild load, be great for that intermediate small game. And you can even load them with black powder. So I think most flexible, that's probably one of your most flexible options. Now, if you live east of the Mississippi, you might decide you get something completely different, but I could see a real case for the 38 Special 357 Magnum. It's certainly more available, more affordable if you're buying factory ammo. If you live west of, let's say, the Missouri, I could see a real case for going for the 44. And you might say, well, why not the 10 millimeter? And the 10 millimeter is a good crossover. You're talking about defense hunting caliber. The problem is that, again, it's not as omnivorous. You can't load really low power, let's say 40, and expect it to run reliably, and then load a really, really hot full power 10 millimeter. You may find some gun that will do both, but I'd say it's less likely to be reliable. Whereas a revolver should be, as long as it's mechanically reliable, the reliability of that handgun to run is not dependent on the power of the cartridge itself. The next one, most flexible, again, I think I'm going to want a manually operated for a lot of the same reasons. So not a semi-auto. Now, if you're talking straight defense, then yeah, semi-auto is better than manually operated. I'm going to go ahead and say that. If you have good ammo, good magazines, all that stuff. If you don't have as reliable of ammunition or magazines or things like that, and it's not just for defense, again, this is best, most versatile all around, not in one specific category. A couple of guns come to mind. The one that I'm going to put out first is going to be an old one, but a good one. And the good thing is they're not really highly coveted, so you can probably find them for not a lot of money. And it might be one of the most versatile rifles ever, period. The Remington 760 or 7600, they're a pump action that fires a modern Spitzer cartridge. If I'm picking a cartridge that's most versatile, the 30-06. The 30-06 gets it. You may decide you want to go 308, but the 308 is close in 150 grain bullets, but it's not as flexible, right? You can get the 220 grain loads or much heavier loads if you wanted to go that route. You can go all the way down to 110 grain up to a 220 grain bullet, and it will handle pretty much anything in there. And if it's manually operated and you hand load, that gives you even more flexibility. The pump action, if you don't know, they're kind of like the Remington 870, but they're in a rifle. The Remington 760, 7600s, they're actually remarkably accurate for a pump action rifle. They are, if you like the 870, they're really ergonomic. They're flexible in ammo. Even, again, if you wanted to load down to take smaller game, you could do that as long as you know what you're doing in hand loading. And you can't just take, like, let's say, a powder charge and cut it in half with most powders. That's not how that works. You really have to know what you're doing in different loads and stick within the published data, but you can get lighter loads if you wanted to do that. Whereas a semi-auto, that's probably not going to fly. And a 30-06 obviously can be great for fighting. I mean, we used it in World War I and World War II. Ammunition is not overly expensive in a bunch of different configurations. There's a lot of really good hunting ammo available for it. There's even decent defensive ammo available for it. So there's that. It's a detachable box magazine. No, it's not as fast as, reloading an AR-10. But again, the AR-10 I think is a more specialized thing. It's certainly better battlefield implement. We're talking all around. This 760, it has the ability to mount good quality modern optics. There's good mounting options for it. You don't have to weld something on the side or anything crazy. It comes with good usable, I should say many of them come with good usable iron sights. So if you need backup iron sights, that's a great thing. You can mount good modern optics. You could take one and mount a red dot on it if you want. It would make a phenomenal truck gun. Make phenomenal defensive choice for most personal protection applications. Again, not a battlefield implement. Wouldn't be the worst choice, but it certainly wouldn't be in my top 10. But if we're talking about most flexible, I think it's even called the Game Master. So if you're talking about a good hunting carbine for most hunting, inside of 300 yards for deer, elk, moose, taking care of a pesky coyote, anything like that. It's a phenomenal choice. A good truck gun. They don't have any reputation, as far as I'm aware, for being unreliable. I even see that they make a 10-round detachable magazine. Now, it comes with a smaller magazine than that, but if you wanted to get to aftermarket 10s, you could have that if this was like your one gun. And again, it's pump action. So if you had to load it or use different kinds of ammunition, it should still work, right? Because you are manually operating that mechanism. I think that's pretty cool. And practical. I think there's something to that. And it's a reasonable rate of fire if you're accustomed to it. Like if you're good at running a pump shotgun, then you're probably a good crossover for the 760. You're probably going to run it really fast too. Is it as fast as a semi-auto? No, it's not. But for most applications, especially in hunting, they're really fast. Now, if we're not talking about the apocalypse, it's going to open up a lot more hunting opportunities too. Now, some states may require straight wall cartridge or shotgun only or something like that, or some areas of states. But there are even more states that will not, or even countries where you cannot hunt with a semi-auto. So the pump action is probably your highest rate of fire. That's for a full power Spitzer cartridge like that. That is not semi-auto. I don't know if I would say it's probably faster if you're good at running a pump than even a lever action, unless you're talking about a pistol caliber carbine with a short throw lever kit. But then we're talking about we're comparing apples and oranges. You're talking a full length rifle cartridge. If we're talking about, a full length rifle cartridge, I would think that the pump action, slide action is as fast as anything that's not semi-auto. Or full auto, obviously. Now, if you don't want that amount of power, if you don't want the 30-06 amount of power, if you wanted a good crossover defense hunting carbine, and let's say again you live east of the Mississippi and there are black bear, and black bear can get really big, but most black bear are not that big. And even on the biggest black bear with judicious bullet selection, it would be fine. The 30-30. Another good option would be a lever action 30-30. For this, I would probably go, and there are some great advantages to both the Winchester 94 and the Marlin 336, but I would probably go with the Marlin 336 because it's got the flat top receiver. You can mount modern optics with it. You can even Gucci-fy them and get all the tactical stuff and put like a, rail and everything on there. If it was going to be your one gun, I could see some real utility in a white light, but I wouldn't go full-blown tactical on it. But a good lever action 30-30 with a good modern optic and LPVO on the top, that'd be hard to beat. And there's probably a subsection of the audience that's screaming at the microphone or the radio or whatever they're listening on their phone, saying the scout rifle, the scout rifle, the scout rifle. I want to get a scout rifle and run it through its paces. I would really like to get a Ruger 77 stainless steel, controlled around feed, and I would like to get one of those in the future and run one and actually put it through its paces. What gets me on that is the bolt action. And if I'm thinking about rate of fire, I think the rate of fire for many positions, standing being the primary one, and I know you can run a bolt action fast. I like bolt actions. My primary hunting rifles are bolt actions, but I think a pump action or a lever action has a faster rate of fire. And if it's for most flexible gun, I don't know. I guess to be fair, I don't know. I haven't run a scout rifle. I would like to get one, maybe run it through a class, run it through some courses. I would like to test out a scout rifle. So the scout rifle may have merit. I'm not aware of anybody that makes a scout rifle in 30-06. Usually the short action, the big thing on the scout rifle is weight, which is really, really important. You may decide you want to go the scout rifle route. I did an entire episode on the scout rifle. I've done two. One with what I would call an expert, much more expert at the scout rifle than me, with Steve. I'm very humbled and blessed that he came on the show and discussed scout rifles with us. You can go look that up, but a very good episode if you're interested in the scout rifle concept. Now let's talk about rimfires. Most flexible rimfire, and I don't think it's the best survival gun. A lot of people do, and that's fine. I totally understand that. People with a lot of experience and a lot of gun know-how and knowledge would choose the 22 as their go-to, like bug-out, end-of-the-world long gun. I would not, but I can see why they would. You can carry a lot of ammo. That's the big and primary reason. I've done a whole show discussing the 22 versus other things for survival, but you can carry a lot of ammo for it. They're very affordable. Anyway, without getting down a rabbit hole, let's talk about what I would consider the most flexible 22. And most people just think about 22 long rifle, and that is by far the most common, and it should be able to fire 22 long rifle, but there's also 22 shorts, 22 longs, and 22 long rifles. There's also CB caps and calibres, and much like we talked about the center fire counterparts, this usually means you're going to have to run a manually operated. Your 1022, for example, unless you do some special stuff, is not going to run a CB cap or a calibre. Why might you want to do this? Because they're quiet. And I've done a whole show about quiet without a suppressor, but if you want to be quiet, really quiet, let's say you're in suburbia, you're in an urban environment, and you want to shoot clandestine, really quiet, with a full-length rifle barrel, CB caps, calibres, even 22 shorts can be very quiet out of a full-length rifle barrel. The ability to shoot CB caps, calibres repeatably, shorts, longs, long rifles, because if you are old enough to own a gun, then you've probably lived through at least 2 major ammo shortages. There are times when 22 long rifle is hard to get. There are times when you can find, let's say, 22 long, and a lot of people will shoot semi-autos, and it may not be advisable to shoot 22 longs out of your semi-auto, but you could run them in other types of actions all day long. The 2 that stand out here to me are the lever action and the bolt action. For the lever action, the one that stands out is the Henry. Henry makes good, affordable lever action 22s. However, I'm not aware that they make any with a stainless steel barrel. I would like stainless steel. So your other option here, and they are stamped to shoot shorts, longs, and long rifles, which is pretty cool. And they're going to have a decent rate of fire, especially if you're talking now about that little teeny throw that you're going to get with the length of the 22. So with that, we do have some options for stainless steel bolt actions. Savage comes to mind. Savage makes many models. Savages are known for being accurate. I don't think their 22s are any different. If you don't care about the stainless, there are many other bolt action 22s. Really fine one would be the Browning. But if you're looking for most flexible, I like stainless steel. You could get a stainless steel Savage, and the good news is they're not a ton of money. The good news is, unlike modern centerfire rifles, many 22s still come with iron sights, which I appreciate. I'd get a model with iron sights, one that didn't have a giant bull barrel that wasn't super heavy. Stainless steel, bolt action, box magazine. I would have a couple of spare magazines, and again, with the bolt action, you may run into a rifle that doesn't feed, but assuming it'll feed everything properly, you should be able to shoot shorts, longs, long rifles, CB caps, calibres, and repeatably, not just one shot. It should be very accurate, unless there's something going on with the gun, and as long as you choose ammo that gun likes, I think that's going to be your most flexible 22. Now let's talk about the most flexible of the most flexible shotguns. Shotguns are the most flexible. Shotgun is the only thing that you can reliably take a mourning dove or a grizzly bear down with and not destroy the mourning dove to the point where you can't eat it. Because you could shoot the mourning dove with a 30-06, but the whole point that you're shooting it hopefully is not because you're a psychopath and you just want to kill it, but because you want to eat it and put meat on the table. You can do that with a shotgun. You can do that with the exact same shotgun with just a change of ammunition. You can put in number 7.5 shot, which is a super cheap stuff you usually see at like Walmart, and you can put in a good Bernecke or Foster slug and take the biggest animals on the planet. You can put in buckshot and make it one of the best home defense options, truck gun options. They're great for deer hunting. They're great for all kinds of hunting, waterfowl hunting, turkey. If you want the most flexible all-around gun, to me it is the shotgun. That's why it would be my number one choice. They're not as cool, they're not as Instagrammy as a lot of other things, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the most Instagrammable guns. Maybe I'll do a whole Gucci gun episode like that. We're talking about straight utilitarian, most flexible. The shotgun gets it. What's the most flexible of the shotguns? Now, I'm going to start off with a 12 gauge. Nothing wrong with a 20 gauge if you want to go 20 gauge route. 20 gauge would be my second choice. It's very available. It's not as available as 12 gauge, and it may be in the running more if they made the short shells, but they don't make the short shells as far as I'm aware for the 20 gauge. If you hand load, maybe you could make your own, but then you'd have to find a gun that was designed to feed them. They do, however, make short shells for the 12 gauge. Now, they do also make the 3.5-inch shells, but those are pretty unique, and I don't think you're going to run into a lot of those unless you're looking for specialty waterfowl or turkey loads. But I would want the shotgun to run 2 3/4, which is a standard, and 3-inch Magnum shells, for sure. And the short shells. Two of the major downfalls of the shotgun that people often talk about is capacity and weight of ammo. The short shells help with both of those. And if you're, let's say, hunting small game, there are plenty of pellets that you can get in different shot sizes in the short shells. If you want to carry more ammo, do you really need a full 2 3/4-inch 12 gauge shell to shoot a dove or a quail? Because if it's for putting meat on the table, you're probably not going to shoot it out of the air because sportsmanship is not what you're worried about. And you get more capacity, depending on how you look at it, with the short shells. Now, there are adapter kits that you can put in shotguns to make them feed the short shells, but then you can only feed the short shells while the adapter is in. You may decide that that's fine for you. You may decide when you're running short shells, you're just going to run short shells, and you're going to take the adapter out and run your regular shells. The only option that I'm aware of that's available to reliably run all the shells, like you can mix and match. You could throw in a 3-inch Magnum and then a short shell and then a 2 3/4 and then a 3-inch Magnum and then a short shell, and it should run them all as reliably, kind of like a revolver, is the Mossberg 590Ss. The Mossberg 590S, I have one. It's a fantastic gun. I've also heard that like the older Winchester 1200s and 1300s will run the short shells. They are beautiful, phenomenal, rugged American-made shotguns. They weren't designed to run the short shells, and I haven't actually done it to see if they actually work, but if you can find one at a good price, they're just a great shotgun anyway. But if they do feed them all reliably, that's really cool. But as far as I'm aware, the one designed to and that will run all of them reliably back-to-back, interchangeably, is the Mossberg 590S. They make several different models of the Mossberg 590S. If you want to know more about kind of my go-to survival shotgun, I've done whole episodes on that. I also did a YouTube video that's fairly lengthy if you want to check that out. YouTube channel is goodshepherdtraining.com. I don't do a lot of videos on there, honestly, because I don't really want to be YouTube famous. And the shorts do way better than the full-length videos, and I don't really like that. I don't want to turn into this whole meme culture where you watch a minute-long entertainment video and think that you know something. I like the long form of the podcast better. But that said, there is a video, goodshepherdtraining.com, Good Shepherd Training on YouTube, and you can watch, and it'll go through not just that shotgun, but how I set it up, the stuff that's with it. It's line 1 gear, different types of ammo for different flexibility, if you wanted to check that out. But I would certainly have the different kinds of ammo, because that's the flexibility of the shotgun, right? It's even so flexible, I could take something like cheap birdshot and make a wax slug or a cut shell slug. They're not as good as a regular slug, but they'll work. The shotgun is just so flexible. The most flexible weapon, period. And if I'm looking at the most flexible of the shotguns, it's going to be the Mossberg 590S. Again, not the best specialty gun, not the best upland bird hunting gun, not the best straight door-kicking shotgun. That'd probably be the Benelli M4. But most flexible, for sure, I think the Mossberg 590S. And again, I'm not saying these are the best guns for your situation. Right? If you're talking about a go-to defensive carry gun, I'm probably not going to recommend what I recommended for the most flexible handgun, because that's a niche application. CCW is its own application. if you ask me for the best battlefield rifle, it's not going to be a Remington 760, right? That's not what I was talking about. But most flexible guns, if you think you've got one that's more flexible, let me know. I'd love to hear from you at goodshepherdtraining.com, or leave a comment, review, whatever. But goodshepherdtraining.com. If you want to support, consider becoming a patron. With that, the tactical tip of the day. If you're talking about most flexible, and you're talking about like survival gear, one of the most flexible pieces of gear, I think, is the military poncho. I have slept, under a poncho hooch. You can make all kinds of shelters with a poncho hooch. You can make anything from a semi-teepee to a lean-to. You can wear it as a poncho. Yeah, I would advise you to have rainproof pants and rain boots, but it's certainly better than nothing. You can literally, if you get caught out in a storm, just wear the poncho and sit down on something that's a little bit elevated like a rock and stay dry. Keep you alive, keep you from getting hypothermia. It's great for all kinds of things. It's basically a more versatile tarp with a head hole in it that you can use to prop it up. You can use to wear as it was intended as a poncho. You can pair it with the poncho liner or the whoopee, depending on if you're Marine Corps or Army. That's its own versatile piece of kit, but a military poncho. You can either get the actual military surplus one. I have a 5-star gear one that I've been using for a long time. It's fantastic. But if you're talking about most flexible, like emergency shelter, they do make the Mylar blankets, and those are great. If you're just going to use them one time, try refolding one of those and getting it as tiny as it was. And they're great to have, and they're great for like an emergency. But most flexible, I think the military poncho. That's your tactical tip of the day. Get one, get some 550 cord, know how to make different kinds of shelters with it. But yeah, the military poncho. With that, the tactical verse of the day. 6 days thou shalt do thy work, and on the 7th day thou shalt rest, that thine ox and thine ass may rest, and the son of thy handmaid, and the stranger may be refreshed. The Sabbath day. You'll see there the similarity with the 4th commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. On it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor the stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. And God blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. That is the only commandment that starts with the word remember, and it seems to be the one we often forget. The Sabbath was made for man, Jesus says. Enjoy it, rest in it, rejoice in it. There's plenty of other times to be distracted by the things of life. Rest and reflect on God and His goodness and His abundance. Rest is good. God tells us to rest. Remember that, whatever day of the week you're listening to this on, there'll be a Sabbath, God willing, in your future. Enjoy it. Embrace it. It even took a while for me to actually, stop working on the Sabbath, because especially as kind of my personality type, maybe everybody, it's just hard to stop and take a break and rest. But whatever you do, wherever you are in life, I know that it's correct because God says it, and God doesn't lie. Remember the Sabbath day. Keep it holy. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.